2 days before my little sister married a European prince, she ripped our grandmother's ring off my finger, threw a plane ticket at my chest, and told me I was too plain and too much of an embarrassment to stand anywhere near her wedding photos. So let me paint you a picture. It's wedding morning. Church bells are ringing across the whole capital. My sister is floating down a marble aisle in a gown that cost more than most people's houses, smiling for cameras from a dozen countries. And 3 miles away, a convoy of blacked-out SUVs is tearing through cobblestone streets, engines screaming, headed straight for a rundown motel behind a truck depot. They're not coming to arrest the woman inside. They're coming to escort her into the palace, sirens off, lights flashing like the fate of a kingdom is riding on getting there in time. 'Cause 48 hours after my own parents had hotel security drag me out onto the sidewalk like a stray dog, I uncovered something so much bigger than a stolen ring. I found $2 million of dirty, federally flagged money sitting inside a royal treasury, and every single dollar of it had my name stamped on the paperwork. By the time I was done, my family didn't just lose a wedding. They lost everything. If you're new here, I'm Claire, a forensic fraud investigator, and welcome to Silent Revenge, the channel where quiet people with spreadsheets and receipts always win in the end. Stick with me on this one because the ending feels so good. Let's go back to where it all started. My name is Claire Whitfield. I'm 34, and I've spent the last 11 years as a senior fraud investigator for a risk advisory firm in downtown Chicago. My job is simple on paper and brutal in practice. I trace stolen money. Shell companies, forged signatures, laundered wires. I find where the bodies are buried, financially speaking. I'm good at it, though you'd never know it from how my family treated me. My younger sister, Paige, is 26. Beautiful, magnetic, and she'd spent her entire adult life chasing wealthy men the way other people chase promotions. 6 months ago, she met Prince Julian of Larenth, a tiny, obscenely wealthy European principality known for its pristine banking sector. Within 4 months, they were engaged. Within 6, the world was watching an American girl from Ohio become a princess. Our parents, Walter and Linda Whitfield, treated the engagement like the second coming. Mom started introducing herself as mother of the bride to the royal family of Larenth at the grocery store, at church, to strangers in the checkout line. Dad, a man who'd filed for business bankruptcy twice, suddenly talked like old money, using words like portfolio and legacy as if he'd ever owned either. Meanwhile, I was the one who'd quietly paid off their business debt 6 years earlier and covered the mortgage on the family house for 2 straight years when Dad's construction company folded. I never said a word about it publicly because my parents always told me not to overshadow Paige. Don't outshine your sister, Claire. She needs this more than you do. You'll understand when you're older. I flew to Larenth 3 days before the wedding to fulfill my duty as the responsible older sister, because that's what I always did. I checked into the Belmore Grand, the palace's official partner hotel, a marble and gold monument the royal family had rented out entirely for wedding guests. I was placed on the 4th floor in a modest room which suited me fine. While I unpacked, a hotel guest relations manager named Priya Anand dropped off a welcome basket, lingered a beat too long, and said quietly, "Just be careful this week, Miss Whitfield. There's a lot going on behind the scenes with your sister's family." I laughed it off. I had no idea how right she was. 2 hours later, my hotel door flew open without a knock. Paige stormed in wearing a silk robe that cost more than my car payment, her diamonds catching the light, her face twisted with something I'd never seen her aim at me before. She threw a crisp white envelope at my chest. It hit my collarbone and fell to the carpet. "Pick it up," she snapped. Inside was a one-way economy ticket back to Chicago, departing in 3 hours. "What is this, Paige?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "It's your ticket out of my life," she said, pacing across the rug like a caged animal. "You're 34, Claire. Unmarried. You stare at spreadsheets for a living. You have 0 style, 0 grace, and you're not walking down that aisle behind me looking like a tax auditor. I'm marrying into royalty. I can't have my spinster sister in the background of my wedding photos." I stood there absorbing the sheer audacity of it. I'd spent a decade bailing our parents out, funding Paige's lifestyle, working 70-hour weeks to build something stable, and never once made her feel small for any of it. "I'm your sister," I said. "I flew across an ocean to support you." "I don't want your support," she laughed, sharp and cruel. "I want you gone before the rehearsal dinner. Don't show your face at my wedding." Then her eyes dropped to my neck, to the thin gold chain holding my grandmother's antique emerald ring, the one piece of family history our grandmother had specifically left to me, because she knew Paige would pawn it in a heartbeat. Paige yanked it clean off, snapping the chain, scraping the back of my neck hard enough to leave a mark. "Give that back," I said, my voice finally rising. She slipped it into her pocket with a satisfied smirk. "A piece like this belongs on a future princess, not a spinster in a cubicle. Consider it your wedding gift to me." Then she walked out, letting the door slam behind her. I stood alone in that room and felt something inside me go very quiet. I'd spent my whole life dimming myself so Paige could shine, funding the illusion of our family's success with my own paycheck. And I'd just watched her steal the last piece of my grandmother I had left, laughing while she did it. They had no idea they'd just declared war on a forensic fraud investigator. I didn't cry. I grabbed my room key and went downstairs to find my parents, needing to know if they'd finally stand up for me. I found them in the lobby near a grand piano, champagne in hand, chatting up a duke. The second they saw me, the smiles vanished. "Claire," Mom hissed, dragging me behind a pillar. "What are you doing down here? You're supposed to stay out of sight until the family portraits." "Paige just broke into my room," I said. "She banned me from the wedding and ripped Grandma's ring off my neck." I waited for outrage. Instead, my parents exchanged a look that chilled me to the bone. "Oh, Claire, must you always be so dramatic?" Mom sighed. "It's just a ring. Your sister's under so much stress right now." "She assaulted me and stole a family heirloom," I said. "Your sister is entering the highest level of society," Dad snapped. "Frankly, your presence here is a liability. You've always been jealous of her." "Jealous," I repeated. "I paid off your business debt, Dad. Covered the mortgage, Mom. I work 70-hour weeks while Paige spends my money shopping. There's nothing about her life I envy." "That's the problem," Mom snapped, pointing a finger in my face. "Go pack your bags and use the ticket she gave you." When I refused to leave without my ring, my father's polished mask cracked completely. He waved over 2 hotel security guards and told them I was harassing his family and needed to be removed. My mother turned her back and sipped her champagne while I was escorted like a criminal up to my room to pack and then straight out the front doors of the hotel. The doors clicked shut behind me. I stood alone on a cobblestone street in a foreign country, gripping my suitcase, betrayed by my own blood. But here's the thing about betraying a forensic fraud investigator: you tend to forget she notices everything. And that night, under a street lamp with nowhere to go, I had no idea just how deep this betrayal actually went. Before you keep going, if you believe karma sometimes needs a little push, hit subscribe right now, because what happens next is exactly why this channel exists. I pulled my coat tighter and opened a travel app to book a room. Card declined. A second card. Declined. A third. Denied. These were cards with massive limits and zero balances. I opened my banking app expecting a simple security hold I could clear with a phone call. Instead, the screen loaded a number that made my stomach drop. My available credit across every account was 0. My checking account was overdrawn by thousands. I refreshed it 3 times, convinced it had to be a glitch. That's when my phone rang. Encrypted caller ID. It was Renee. Renee is my sister-in-law, married to my older brother Marcus, and one of the sharpest corporate attorneys in Chicago. She's also the only person in my family who ever saw my parents and Paige clearly. "Claire, listen carefully," she said, skipping every greeting. "Are you somewhere safe?" "I'm standing outside the hotel. Purity just threw me out. My cards are all frozen." "I know," Renee said, her voice grim. I'm opening mail forwarded from your parents' place in Ohio right now because your dad listed Marcus as a backup contact on the estate years ago. Claire, your credit score dropped over 300 points in the last 48 hours. That's impossible, I said. I have zero debt. I pay everything in full. You didn't open these accounts, Renee said flatly. Someone else did. Who would have the information to do that? I asked, already knowing the answer. You already know, Renee said softly. Your parents have your social security number, your birth certificate, every document from when you lived at home, every security answer a bank would ever ask for. This isn't just a drained checking account, she continued. My legal database is showing a massive property lien filed under your name. Find secure Wi-Fi right now. I'm wiring emergency cash to a digital wallet under your maiden name so it can't be traced. Get off the street. I found a 24-hour internet cafe down a side alley, bought coffee with the funds Renee sent, and opened a video call. Her face filled my screen, lit only by her monitors, sharp and furious. Do you remember the strip retail plaza your grandfather left you and your parents jointly in Denver? She asked. The one you let them manage because you never wanted the income, just wanted to honor him? I nodded. I owned 40% of that building. I'd never touched a cent of the rental income. They leveraged it, Renee said. But they needed your signature. She shared her screen, a scanned mortgage document, my name forged on the borrower line so precisely it made my skin crawl, beside a digital notary stamp sealed 3 weeks earlier. $2.4 million, Renee said. Against the Denver property. Using your credit. $2.4 million. How did a bank approve that? I asked, my professional instincts kicking in over the shock. Not on your parents' financials, they'd already filed bankruptcy once. On yours. Zero debt, a 6-figure salary, immaculate credit. You were the perfect phantom borrower, Claire. And they knew it. I felt sick. My parents had watched me build an entire financial fortress out of discipline and sacrifice, and picked the lock and walked right in. Where did the money go? I asked. Renee pulled up a wire receipt. The second it cleared, your dad wired it internationally. Straight into a holding account in Larenth. That was the missing piece. 14 days ago was exactly when Paige started posting 5-figure shopping sprees in Milan. They knew what would happen, I whispered. A $2.4 million mortgage under my name would blow up eventually. My credit destroyed, my job gone. My firm requires spotless financial integrity as a condition of employment. They sacrificed me. On purpose. To buy Paige a royal wedding. They needed you gone and broke before that loan defaulted, Renee said. That's why they had security throw you out tonight. Not the ring. The bomb was already ticking. I closed my eyes. Every insult, every backhanded compliment, every year of quietly funding my family's fake wealth suddenly made a horrifying kind of sense. Renee, I said, my voice ice flat. Be my proxy on U.S. soil. Pull every document tied to that mortgage. IP addresses on the signature. Routing numbers on the wire. Everything. Already on it, Renee said. What are you going to do from Larenth? I took a slow sip of black coffee. My job. They used my identity to move $2.4 million stolen dollars into a foreign royal treasury. I'm going to find out exactly where it's sitting. Then I'm going to burn this fairy tale to the ground. Before we get into exactly how she did it, if you've ever had a family member treat your success like their personal ATM, drop a 1 in the comments. I want to see how many of you have lived some version of this. I found a cheap motel 3 miles outside the Royal District, behind a commercial transit depot. No valet, no concierge, no connection to the high society circles my family was infiltrating. I paid cash with Renee's wired funds. The room was bare, a narrow bed, a laminate desk, a flickering bathroom light. A staggering downgrade from the marble suite I'd just been thrown out of. My parents thought I was wandering the streets crying. They had no idea I was already digging trenches for a financial war. I set up my laptop, connected to a VPN, and opened the forensic tracing software my firm used for federal audits. Renee had already sent the routing data from the forged mortgage. I fed it in and watched the money trail draw itself out. $2.4 million had originated at a Denver bank, bounced through a Delaware clearinghouse, standard laundering procedure, then hit a shell called Solstice Vantage Group, registered in the Cayman Islands. My dad, a man who loved a bargain more than the truth, hadn't hired an offshore attorney. He'd bought a shell company off a sketchy online broker. That cheapness was about to be his undoing. I traced the money's final leg into an escrow account inside the Central Bank of Larenth, earmarked as Paige's official bridal trust. Larenth protocol required a bride's family to prove independent generational wealth before marrying into the crown. My parents didn't have $2.4 million. They didn't have $200,000. So they stole my identity to fake an entire family fortune and hand it to a king as proof of old money legitimacy. I was deep in that trace when my phone exploded with texts from cousins and old classmates, all sending the same gossip blog headline: newly minted American royal forced to banish unstable older sister before fairytale wedding. The article claimed I'd shown up intoxicated, threatened hotel staff, and that my heartbroken parents were now arranging emergency psychiatric care for me. It wasn't a leak. It was a coordinated hit, a crisis PR team hired to explain my absence and discredit me in advance, in case I ever talked about the stolen money or the stolen ring. It was clever, honestly. If I spoke up now about anything, I'd just look like a jealous, unstable accuser trying to ruin my sister's fairy tale out of spite. I sat with that for exactly 30 seconds, feeling the old familiar sting of being painted as the villain for simply existing. Then I got back to work because a smear campaign only works if you let it rattle you, and I had already decided I wouldn't. Got worse. My phone rang again, my managing partner calling near midnight. "Claire," he said, stiff and uncomfortable, "we've been flooded with alerts about the articles online. Our firm audits federal agencies and a foreign central bank. We can't have a senior investigator trending as an unstable security risk. Effective immediately, you're suspended. Unpaid. Credentials cut off within the hour." "I understand," I said, because I did. Corporate risk management is painfully predictable. What my firm didn't know, months earlier during a routine stress test, I'd quietly built myself a backup access node into our international auditing software, a quiet failsafe. My managing partner thought he'd locked the front door. He had no idea I was already sitting in the basement with full access to the Central Bank of Larenth's ledgers. And now I had something better than access: unlimited time. I want to pause here for 1 second because this next part is where everything cracked wide open. So if you've made it this far, this story is about to get so much bigger than a family feud. Make sure you're subscribed because you don't want to miss where this goes. I built a timeline airtight enough that no royal decree or PR team could ever unravel it. I pulled the metadata off the forged mortgage and ran it through a geolocation tool. The IP address matched the router at my parents' house in Ohio. Timestamp, 2:14 p.m. on a Tuesday, the exact hour I was presenting to 12 banking executives in a Chicago boardroom, with a signed security log to prove it. My parents' forgery had an alibi problem, and the alibi was me. Then I went after Solstice Vantage Group. What came back stopped me cold. It wasn't a generic tax shelter, it was an active laundering vehicle under joint FBI and Interpol investigation, tied to a sanctioned Eastern European organized crime network funneling assets around U.S. Treasury sanctions. My dad hadn't just stolen my identity. He'd routed $2.4 million through an active federal criminal investigation and wired it straight into a foreign king's personal treasury. I called Renee immediately. Pull federal court dockets. Search Solstice Vantage Group. A pause. Then, "Claire, this is a massive racketeering case. The FBI has wiretaps on every account tied to this network." Which means the second my dad wired that money through it and into a royal escrow account, he connected an active international crime syndicate directly to the Crown of Larenth. It was no longer a family dispute over a mortgage. It was a federal money laundering case, and my parents had tied a sovereign nation's royal family to it with a $2.4 million bow. While I worked from that motel, Renee did the domestic legwork. She walked into the Denver bank branch that approved the loan, dropped a drafted federal complaint on the manager's desk, and threatened to name the bank as a co-conspirator if he didn't hand over security footage. He folded in under 10 minutes. The footage was crystal clear, my parents, laughing, forging my signature on a tablet. Renee pulled the audio too, my dad, telling the loan officer my sister trusted them to handle the refinancing while she was too busy working to notice. Then Renee found something worse, a voicemail my dad left my brother Marcus 2 nights earlier, explaining exactly why they needed hotel security to throw me out. We had to get her out before she checked her accounts, the mortgage cleared, but we're not paying the first installment. She's the sacrifice we had to make for the family. I sat in that motel room and listened to my own father call me a sacrifice. I felt nothing but clarity. Together, we built the final dossier, 100 pages of forged signatures, wire logs, shell company records, Interpol flags, and my father's own recorded voice admitting to premeditated fraud, organized like an executive federal briefing, cold and irrefutable. I sent it to the Larenth Ministry of Finance, the Royal Treasury, and the commander of the Royal Guard. Renee filed a parallel copy with the FBI's white-collar crime division. I hit send at 6:47 a.m. wedding day. My part in the digital war was over. Now it was time for the war to become physical. 22 minutes later, a convoy of tactical SUVs pulled into my motel's cracked parking lot, boxing in every exit. I watched through the curtain, already dressed in the sharpest white suit I owned, because if I was about to stand before a king, I intended to look like the only person in the room holding a winning hand. The knock was heavy and deliberate. 2 members of the Royal Guard stood outside, armored, unreadable behind dark sunglasses. Taller one bowed his head. "Miss Whitfield, His Majesty King Cassius requests your presence at the palace." Immediately, I picked up my briefcase, holding the entire dossier in physical form, and said the only thing there was to say. "Lead the way. We're getting close to the part you've all been waiting for. But before we get there, smash that like button if you're rooting for Claire, because what happens in that ballroom is worth every second of the wait." Convoy tore through streets lined with cheering crowds tossing flower petals for a fairy tale already dead. We bypassed the public entrance, moving through fortified tunnels reserved for royal officials, up a private elevator, down a gilded hallway lined with priceless art. Inside the grand ballroom, the wedding was in full swing. Crystal chandeliers, a live orchestra, hundreds of Europe's most powerful people. At the center of the dance floor, Paige twirled in Prince Julian's arms, my grandmother's stolen emerald glittering at her throat, completely unaware her fairy tale was 30 seconds from collapsing. My parents held court nearby with foreign dignitaries, drunk on champagne and delusion. The Royal Guard shoved the massive doors open. They slammed against the marble walls like thunder. The orchestra screeched to a stop. Every head in that room turned. I walked in wearing white, flanked by 4 armed members of the king's own detail. Every step echoed like a gunshot across the silent marble floor. My father dropped his champagne glass, it shattered at his feet. My mother's hand flew to her mouth. And Paige just stared, the color draining from her face because she recognized exactly what those guards meant before she understood why. King Cassius rose from his throne and walked directly toward me, bypassing his own son, bypassing the bride. He extended his hand. "Thank you, Miss Whitfield," he said, loud enough for every camera to catch. "Your service to this crown today will not be forgotten. You've saved this kingdom from a catastrophic breach of national security." I opened my briefcase and handed the dossier directly to Prince Julian. "Your Highness, you believe you're marrying old American money. You're not. Your bride's family is broke. They forged my signature and stole $2.4 million using my identity to fund the trust sitting in your royal treasury right now, and every dollar of it is tied to a federal investigation into an organized crime network under U.S. sanctions." Julian's hand shook as he flipped through the pages. Paige lunged forward, shrieking that I was jealous and unstable, that her family's PR team had already warned him about me. He stepped away from her like she was contagious and kept reading. My dad tried excuses. My mom, sensing the room turning, switched to her favorite weapon, gaslighting, loud and theatrical, insisting I was having a breakdown and needed to be hospitalized, not standing in a royal ballroom. I didn't argue. I nodded toward the king's communications advisor, who tapped a tablet. The massive display screens flickered to life, and Renee's face filled every screen in the ballroom, live from Chicago. "Good evening," she said calmly. "My name is Renee Foster, corporate attorney. This morning, under threat of federal subpoena, I obtained security footage from the bank that approved a fraudulent $2.4 million loan under Claire Whitfield's name." The screen cut to the footage, my parents, laughing, forging my signature in high definition. Then she played the voicemail. My father's own voice, filling that ballroom, explaining exactly how they planned to sacrifice me to fund Paige's wedding. Nobody in that room breathed. My mother collapsed to her knees, sobbing for real this time. My father stood frozen, his mouth opening and closing with nothing coming out. And Paige just kept whispering, "No, no, no," like the word alone could undo what everyone had just seen. King Cassius raised his hand, and the room fell into absolute silence. "This crown is built on financial integrity," he said. "We do not tolerate deception, and we will not allow our royal line to be contaminated by international fraud. This marriage was built on identity theft and money laundering. As sovereign of Larenth, I hereby annul this union, effective immediately. Permanently void." Paige screamed. Julian didn't even look at her. "You brought a federal criminal investigation to the steps of my family's palace," he said. "It's not just the money that disgusts me. It's what you were willing to become to get it." The royal protocol officer stripped Paige of the tiara, the borrowed jewels, the borrowed title, piece by piece in front of every camera in that room. When she reached for the emerald at Paige's throat, my sister clutched it, sobbing that it was her heirloom. "That belongs to me," I said, stepping forward. "You ripped it off my neck and told me a princess deserved it more. You're not a princess, Paige. You're a criminal waiting on federal charges." The officer pried it loose and handed it to me. I slipped it into my pocket. The last thread connecting us snapped clean. "Get them out of my sight," the king commanded. The royal guard hauled my parents up by their arms. My mother screamed my name, begging, calling me family, calling me blood. "My blood is in Chicago building a federal case," I told her. "Have a safe flight home." They were deported within hours. No red carpet, no private jet, just a stark cargo plane and a long, silent flight where the three of them finally turned their cruelty on each other, each blaming the others for everything falling apart. When that plane touched down back in the States, my parents and Paige walked straight off the stairs into a wall of federal agents, FBI, Homeland Security, Treasury investigators. Renee's filing had moved fast, and Special Agent Daniel Cho was waiting with warrants in hand. My father tried calling it a family dispute over a loan. The agent wasn't interested. All three were arrested on the tarmac, cuffed, and read charges including wire fraud, aggravated identity theft, bank fraud, and international money laundering tied to a sanctioned criminal network. If you've made it this far, you already know how satisfying it is watching people who thought they were untouchable get walked across a tarmac in handcuffs. But stay with me, the ending is even better than the arrest. 1 year later, I'm standing on the balcony of a Chicago penthouse I bought with my own money, holding a glass of wine that costs more than that motel room did for a full week. My old firm tried to win me back with a partnership offer and full back pay once they realized I'd single-handedly protected them from a federal scandal. I turned it down. Instead, I took a call from the Ministry of Finance of Larenth. King Cassius wanted me specifically to oversee his kingdom's financial security permanently. Renee left her firm too, and we built our own practice, Whitfield and Foster, out of a sleek office overlooking the city. She also filed for divorce from my brother Marcus, who'd spent the entire ordeal too much of a coward to pick a side, and who has quietly faded into irrelevance ever since. My dad is serving 9 years in a federal facility in Pennsylvania. My mom is serving 7 at a federal camp for women. Every asset they had was seized to pay restitution and cover the fines. The house in Ohio, the one I quietly paid the mortgage on for 2 years, was auctioned off months ago to strangers who got a very good deal. And Paige lost everything the internet could take from her. No prince, no trust fund, no fairy tale ending. Last I heard, she's folding designer clothes at a department store on the same street she used to shop on like they owed her something, ringing up the credit cards of women who used to envy her from a distance, and never once looking up. People spend their whole lives confusing the appearance of power with the real thing. They think a title, a designer dress, or someone else's money makes them untouchable. It doesn't. Real power is knowing how to follow the money, and knowing exactly when to stop staying quiet. If you've ever had to draw a hard line with a toxic family member or walk away from people who only valued you for what you could give them, tell me your story in the comments below. Your strength might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. And if you loved watching a spreadsheet take down a royal wedding, make sure you're subscribed to Silent Revenge, because this is exactly the kind of quiet, calculated justice we live for around here. Stay sharp. Stay unbothered. And always, always follow the money.